Charlton Heston names the 10 biggest jerks in Hollywood history. And wait till you hear who tops his list, the man who turned a charity gala into a fistfight over cold shrimp. Picture this: Moses himself, draped in biblical robes, towering over a golden calf of Hollywood egos. Now imagine that same granite-faced icon keeping a secret ledger of every slight, every betrayal, every backstage knife twisted into his legendary spine. From the chariot races of Ben-Hur to the apocalyptic wasteland of Planet of the Apes, Charlton Heston commanded screens with righteous fury. But behind those chiseled features simmered decades of collected grievances. What kind of behavior could make a man who played prophets and presidents finally break his silence? Subscribe now, because this list reads like a who's who of Tinseltown's most ruthless operators. The story begins not on a Hollywood soundstage, but in a modest two-story house in Evanston, Illinois, where John Charles Carter, the boy who would become Charlton Heston, first discovered the intoxicating power of commanding an audience. Born October 4, 1923, young John spent his earliest years in the rural wilderness of Michigan, where his father operated a struggling sawmill and his mother dreamed of stages far beyond the forest line. When his parents divorced, 10-year-old John found himself transplanted to the Chicago suburbs with a new stepfather and a burning need to prove himself worthy of attention. High school drama classes became his battlefield, Shakespeare his ammunition. Teachers reportedly gasped when the gangly teenager delivered Mark Antony's funeral oration with such volcanic intensity that actual tears streaked down freshman faces. Northwestern University beckoned with a drama scholarship, but World War II had other plans. Heston enlisted in the Army Air Forces, spending 3 years as a radio operator on B-25 bombers in the Aleutian Islands, a crucible that would forge his trademark stoicism and his intolerance for Hollywood prima donnas who'd never faced real danger. Can you imagine returning from war to find your peers complaining about their trailers being too small? Post-war New York welcomed him with open arms and empty pockets. He and his college sweetheart Lydia Clark, herself a talented actress who allegedly outshone him in their Northwestern productions, survived on peanut butter sandwiches while haunting Broadway auditions. Television was just flickering to life, and Heston's Mount Rushmore profile made him a natural for live dramatic broadcasts. CBS executives reportedly fought over who discovered him first, each claiming credit for recognizing that his face belonged on monuments, not just monitors. Hollywood came calling in 1950 with Dark City, a noir thriller that proved Heston could smolder as effectively as he could sermonize. But it was Cecil B. DeMille who transformed the Chicago carpenter's son into a colossus. The legendary director allegedly took one look at Heston's screen test for The Greatest Show on Earth and declared, "Finally, an actor who makes the elephants look small." That 1952 circus epic won Best Picture and launched Heston into the stratosphere of leading men who could carry biblical epics on their broad shoulders. In 1956, sealed his fate as Hollywood's go-to deity. DeMille's final masterpiece grossed an astronomical $122 million and burned Heston's image into global consciousness as the lawgiver himself. Studio executives genuflected. Co-stars whispered about his method intensity. Anne Baxter, who played Nefertiri, reportedly told her hairdresser that Heston stayed in character between takes, blessing craft services with improvised sermons. Whether true or Hollywood mythology, the reputation stuck. Here was an actor who took his roles as seriously as scripture. Then came 1959's Ben-Hur, the apex of sword and sandal spectaculars. 11 Academy Awards, including Heston's Best Actor trophy, validated what everyone suspected. He wasn't just playing heroes, he was becoming them. That famous chariot race? Heston trained for weeks, allegedly refusing stunt doubles for all but the most death-defying moments. When he finally stood on that Oscar stage, clutching his golden idol, some wondered if success might soften those righteous edges. It didn't. If anything, the throne of Hollywood royalty gave him a better view of the industry's grotesque underbelly. The same year he won his Oscar, he began keeping what insiders called the book, a leather-bound journal where he recorded every betrayal, every display of unprofessional conduct, every moment when someone's ego endangered a production or insulted his principles. Studio secretaries reportedly glimpsed him writing in it between takes, his jaw clenched like he was chiseling commandments into stone tablets. What would you have written in your own book of grudges? The 1960s brought artistic triumphs and personal trials in equal measure. El Cid, The Agony and the Ecstasy, Planet of the Apes. Each role seemed designed to showcase his gift for playing men standing alone against impossible odds. Off-screen, he stood equally alone, increasingly alienated from Hollywood's shifting values. While his peers embraced the counterculture, Heston clung to his conservative principles like a life raft in a storm of change. His marriage to Lydia survived where so many Hollywood unions crumbled, but reportedly not without battles that rivaled his on-screen conflicts. Industry gossips whispered about screaming matches over his political activities, particularly his increasingly visible support for civil rights, a stance that earned him both Martin Luther King Jr.'s personal thanks and death threats from less enlightened corners of America. Later, his pivot to gun rights advocacy would divide Hollywood even further, transforming him from respected elder statesman to controversial lightning rod. The women of Hollywood presented their own complications. While Heston maintained a public image of marital fidelity, allegedly several leading ladies found themselves caught between his granite morality and magnetic presence. One unnamed Italian actress from The Agony and the Ecstasy reportedly told her diary that Heston was untouchable ice that burns when you get too close. Whether she meant it literally or metaphorically remains buried in Roman gossip columns. By the 1970s, disaster films had replaced biblical epics as Hollywood's cash cows, and Heston adapted like a chameleon in chain mail. Airport 1975, Earthquake, The Towering Inferno. He saved lives with the same intensity he'd once parted seas. Yet behind the scenes, his relationships with fellow actors grew increasingly strained. The new generation of method actors found him rigid. He found them self-indulgent. One young co-star allegedly complained that working with Heston was like acting opposite your disapproving father, who also happens to be God. Politics provided another battlefield. As president of the Screen Actors Guild from 1965 to 1971, Heston fought for performers' rights while simultaneously condemning what he saw as Hollywood's moral decay. His support for Republican candidates made him persona non grata at certain industry gatherings. Jane Fonda reportedly crossed the street to avoid him after his public criticism of her anti-war activism. The man who'd marched with King now found himself branded a reactionary by the very industry that had crowned him. Can you imagine choosing principles over popularity in a town that worships the latter? His transformation into the face of the National Rifle Association in the 1990s completed his evolution from Hollywood hero to conservative icon and pariah to many former friends. That famous cold dead hands speech became either a rallying cry or a mockery, depending on which side of Sunset Boulevard you occupied. Former co-stars allegedly removed his photos from their walls. Directors who'd once begged for his participation now found other projects when his name arose. But Heston never blinked. If anything, the isolation seemed to energize him. He continued acting into his 70s, bringing gravitas to projects that barely deserved his shadow. Young actors on sets reportedly watched in awe as he delivered Shakespeare between takes, maintaining his instrument like a master violinist, refusing to let age dim his strings. Even those who despised his politics admitted his professionalism remained unmatched. The Alzheimer's diagnosis in 2002 brought a cruel irony. The man who'd memorized thousands of lines, who defined himself through the power of his voice, slowly losing both. His final public appearance showed glimpses of the old fire, but friends reportedly wept at the recognition flickering in and out of those famous eyes. When he passed on April 5, 2008, Hollywood's reaction was tellingly mixed. Public tributes praising his talent, private relief that a difficult chapter had closed. But what most didn't know was that Lydia had discovered the book. Tucked in his study between scripts and award certificates sat that leather journal, its pages yellowed but the handwriting still bold as Moses' tablets. Inside lay 5 decades of carefully recorded grievances, not petty gossip, but a righteous accounting of those who'd violated his iron code of professional conduct. Some names surprised no one, Others shocked even seasoned Hollywood observers. All those battles carved a blacklist into his memory that time couldn't erase, even as everything else faded. Late in life, he finally opened his private notebook to a trusted friend. Here are the 10 biggest jerks he couldn't forgive. Marlon Brando, the mumbling mutineer. The 1960 set of The Appaloosa became a war zone when Brando decided to improvise every scene, leaving Heston standing there like a statue while Marlon explored his motivation for mounting a horse. Crew members recall Heston's face turning purple as Brando spent 4 hours discussing with the horse whether it represented his father. Their mutual friend, Sidney Poitier, reportedly had to physically separate them when Brando suggested Heston's acting style belonged in a museum, preferably behind glass. He thought breaking rules made him an artist, Heston allegedly wrote. It just made him unemployable. Genius without discipline is just expensive chaos, but the next name on Heston's list made Brando look punctual. 2. Frank Sinatra, the chairman of cruelty. During a 1963 Friars Club roast, Sinatra publicly mocked Heston's Moses complex for 20 minutes straight, complete with a blasphemous song parody that left half the room squirming. But the real betrayal came when Sinatra allegedly sabotaged Heston's dream project about Michelangelo by convincing investors the script was duller than watching paint dry on the Sistine Chapel. Years later, at a Democratic fundraiser, Sinatra reportedly introduced Heston as the only man in Hollywood who makes statues look animated. He confused being powerful with being decent, Heston's journal reportedly states. When even Moses can't forgive you, you know you've crossed a line. Speaking of crossing lines, wait until you hear about number 3. 3. Burt Lancaster, the acrobatic assassin. On 1965's The Warlord, Lancaster's competitiveness turned toxic when he realized Heston was getting better reviews. Studio memos document Lancaster demanding rewrites that would diminish Heston's role, then showing up to Heston's scenes to loudly offer notes that confused the crew and infuriated the director. The breaking point came when Lancaster allegedly told a visiting journalist that Heston acts with all the flexibility of an iron girder. Jealousy made him cruel, Heston reportedly penned, and cruelty made him small. Professional rivalry is one thing, but deliberately sabotaging a colleague's work, that's unforgivable, though the next jerk made sabotage into an art form. 4. Otto Preminger, the Austrian autocrat. The legendary director's sadistic treatment of actors was infamous, but during 1963's The Cardinal, he targeted Heston with special venom. Preminger allegedly called Heston a wooden Indian in front of 200 extras, then demanded 47 takes of a simple walking scene just to humiliate him. When Heston finally confronted him privately, Preminger reportedly laughed and said, "Moses needed 40 years in the desert. You need 40 years of acting lessons." He fed on others' pain like a vampire, Heston allegedly scrawled in his journal. Some directors push actors to greatness, others push them to homicide, and number 5 pushed everyone's buttons. 5. William Holden, the bitter bachelor. Their collaboration on The Towering Inferno should have been legendary, but Holden's alcoholism and resentment turned it into a nightmare. He reportedly showed up drunk to their major scenes, forcing endless retakes while sneering at Heston's sobriety. The worst moment came when Holden told a visiting reporter that Heston probably rehearses his orgasms. Security had to be called when Heston finally snapped and allegedly grabbed Holden by his tuxedo collar. Talent wasted on self-pity, Heston's notebook reportedly records, is talent murdered. Addiction is a disease, but cruelty is a choice, and our next entry chose cruelty every single day. 6. Gore Vidal, the venomous intellectual. During the production of Ben-Hur, Vidal claimed credit for writing a gay subtext between Judah and Masala, then publicly mocked Heston for being too simple to understand it. Their feud exploded in 1968 when Vidal wrote an essay calling Heston Hollywood's favorite fascist and allegedly spread rumors that Heston couldn't read scripts without moving his lips. The final insult came at a 1975 party where Vidal loudly asked if Heston's NRA membership was compensation for something. He poisoned with words what he couldn't create with talent, Heston allegedly wrote. Intellectuals who weaponize their wit are dangerous. But wait, until you meet the executive who weaponized entire studios. 7. Jack Warner, the tyrant of Burbank. The Warner Brothers mogul treated actors like Cattle and Heston like a particularly stubborn bull. During negotiations for the Omega Man, Warner allegedly threatened to destroy Heston's career if he didn't accept a pay cut, then leaked false stories about Heston being difficult to gossip columnists. The relationship exploded when Warner told a room full of executives that Heston had all the charm of a stopped clock, right twice a day, insufferable the rest. He proved that money can't purchase class, Heston's journal reportedly states. Studio heads playing God is nothing new, but our next entry took method acting to methodically insane levels. 8. Dennis Hopper, the chemical cowboy. Their paths crossed during 1968's The Last Movie, where Hopper's drug-fueled approach to filmmaking clashed catastrophically with Heston's discipline. Hopper allegedly called Heston a fascist dinosaur for refusing to try peyote for a scene, then disrupted Heston's takes by playing Jefferson Airplane at maximum volume. The partnership ended when Hopper reportedly urinated on Heston's trailer door after being criticized for keeping the crew waiting 6 hours. He mistook chaos for creativity, Heston allegedly noted, and chemicals for courage. The counterculture had its place, but not when it endangered people's safety, unlike our next entry, which endangered entire productions. 9. Sean Penn, the Tantrum King. Though they never worked together directly, Penn earned Heston's ire through sheer proximity and reputation. At a 1987 Directors Guild screening, Penn allegedly called Heston everything wrong with old Hollywood within earshot, then made a show of walking out when Heston entered. Industry veterans report Penn later drunkenly crashed an NRA event just to heckle Heston's speech about responsible gun ownership, security escorting him out while he screamed about fascist relics. Rage masquerading as righteousness, Heston's notebook reportedly declares. Young actors rebelling against the establishment is tradition, but what happens when the establishment rebels against itself? 10. Michael Moore, the Ambush Artist. The documentary filmmaker's surprise confrontation of an elderly, Alzheimer's-affected Heston in Bowling for Columbine represented everything Heston despised about Hollywood's new breed. Moore allegedly gained access by claiming he wanted to honor Heston's civil rights work, then twisted the interview into a hit piece. The image of a confused Heston walking away while Moore shouted questions became, for many, the cruelest moment in documentary history. He proved that cameras can be weapons, a late journal entry reportedly reads, wielded by cowards. Perhaps no single incident better exemplified why Heston kept his list. Some people's cruelty deserved documentation. Charlton Heston's ledger of grievances reads like a roadmap of Hollywood's evolution from Golden Age grandeur to modern cynicism. Each name represents not just a personal slight, but a violation of the code that guided his 6-decade career: professionalism, preparation, and respect for the craft that made them all rich and famous. That he maintained such standards while others abandoned them speaks to either admirable integrity or stubborn inflexibility, perhaps both. What emerges from the book isn't just bitterness but bewilderment. How could an industry built on creating dreams become so nightmarish behind the scenes? How could artists blessed with such gifts waste them on petty cruelties? The man who played civilization's lawgivers never found satisfactory answers. In the end, Heston's list serves as both indictment and mirror. Every industry has its jerks, but Hollywood's get documented in leather-bound journals and $1,000 therapy sessions. Whether you see Heston as a righteous prophet or an inflexible relic depends largely on which side of his ledger you'd land. What's undeniable is this: in an industry that worships youth and relevance, Heston chose principles over popularity, conviction over convenience. His list of jerks might say as much about him as it does about them, but then again, emphasis, isn't that always the case? Who would make your list of Hollywood's biggest jerks? Drop a comment below with your top 3 names, bonus points if you explain why. And if you want more behind-the-scenes scandals from Tinseltown's golden age, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Tomorrow we're exposing Marilyn Monroe's secret diary of Hollywood wolves. You won't believe who tops her list.